I sailed on Sun Princess for several weeks and put the many big changes Princess introduced with this new Sphere-class ship to the test. In some areas like cabins and fast food, they've taken a major step forward, but in many more key areas like entertainment venues and amenities, they've unfortunately taken 2 big steps back. Princess's newest Royal-class ships have had rave reviews, and it's an open question whether Princess has made a big mistake introducing so many changes to a winning formula. In this episode of the Chill Cruiser, I'll walk you through the 7 hits and 14 misses on this flashy but flawed and unfinished new ship. If you're considering your cruise on Sun Princess, you're not going to want to miss this. Hey cruisers, Andrew from Ottawa, Canada here. Welcome to the Chill Cruiser, where I review cruise ships from a chill perspective. Today I'm going to walk you through what I think are the big hits and misses on Princess's newest ship, Sun Princess. Princess introduced hundreds of changes in this new class of ship called Sphere Class. I recently returned from a European adventure where I spent 40 days on the ship as a paying guest, so I had a good amount of time to put every single one of the many changes to the test. I say paying guest because I saw Princess host several events with influencers and travel agents that were heavily stage managed and emphasized the Instagram qualities of the ship over the practicalities and limitations of actually sailing on the ship. Many influencers who stayed on board were upgraded to what is now called the Sanctuary Collection, so they were in a pampered bubble that most cruisers wouldn't have the budget to experience. Princess built 6 ships in the Royal class, and the last 2, Enchanted and Discovery, included many enhancements that I think found a great balance of spaces to relax, enjoy live music and entertainment, with a huge variety of different restaurants from fast food to very unique specialty dining experiences. Unfortunately, instead of building on the success of the Royal class and fixing some of its flaws, with the Sphere class they essentially started from scratch and built something that looks and feels very unfamiliar to all previous Princess ships. Although there are 7 areas where Princess took a step forward, like cabins and fast food options, there are 14 areas where they took a step back, like entertainment venues and amenities. I'll walk you through each of them according to the categories I use in my ship reviews, like cabins, food, and entertainment, but I'll start with overall design and layout. A big miss on Sun is that despite sailing for more than 6 months, the ship's still not finished. Throughout my cruises this summer, there was a lot of work going on throughout the ship that was very disruptive, including ripping out the Park 19 family activity complex that couldn't get safety certified, installing new showers in the Lido area, and then painting various venues that got dirty because of all that work. When I disembarked the ship on October 11th, the components of Park 19 had been removed, but there still wasn't a fully functioning sports deck, and there were several restaurants that were about to be moved to prepare for the launch of the Sanctuary Collection. You didn't need to go very far in every deck to come across broken doors or windows that made getting into certain venues difficult. Princess had to cancel 2 of Sun's inaugural cruises because of delays in finalizing the ship, and it appears that they should have canceled even more cruises to get the ship 100% ready. Something that I originally was going to say as a hit is the fact that the ship uses liquefied natural gas, or LNG, which Princess says significantly reduces emissions, but they don't provide any more specifics to quantify exactly how much compared to its other ships, so I'll leave that as a question mark for now, which is too bad because Sun needs a hit in the design category. One of the biggest complaints I heard from fellow guests again and again was how many key venues were too small, including the theater, the gym, and the new dome complex, which I think is one of the biggest deal breakers for this ship. Sun can accommodate 4,300 guests at double capacity, but the main theater only has space for less than a quarter of that number, or just under 1,000 seats. The dome only has capacity for 300 people, and Princess Live even less, only 200. This led to massive lineups and a lot of disappointment during big events like the production shows and cirque shows. On my last cruise, people started lining up 2 hours before production shows, and a fight broke out over theater seats that led to a couple in their 70s losing their bar privileges for the rest of the cruise. If you wanted a seat for the cirque show, you had to line up at least 30 minutes before the show, an hour on some nights if you wanted an unobstructed view. Waiting in queues is one of my biggest pet peeves and one of the absolute last things I want to do while on vacation. Since changing the physical venues isn't exactly an option, the least Princess can do is introduce a ticketing system to reduce wait times and set clear expectations about seat availability. On my last cruise, they added a 3rd showing for each production show a day or 2 after the first 2 showings, but they didn't communicate it very well, so the first 2 shows were still over capacity with people standing and sitting on stairs. Another big miss is what I'll call clumsy venue design and placement. The dome's a good example. It's a large and beautiful space that works well as a solarium-style lounge during the day, but they kick everyone out at around 2 p.m. to set up for the evening cirque shows, which usually don't have enough seats to accommodate demand. So just imagine you're relaxed, enjoying a comfortable lounger after lunch on a sea day, and then you hear this.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We hope you enjoyed your experience in the dome. At this time, We are going to ask you to please relocate to one of our other venues around the festival so we can prepare the dome for future events. Thank you for your understanding and have a great day ahead.
That's exactly what you hear when they kick everyone out. This is one of the silliest cruise ship venue design decisions I've ever seen. Princess Live is a popular multi-purpose venue for comedy and game shows and presentations, but on Sun they place it right next to the performance area for the Piazza, which means that if you're watching a comedian in the evening, chances are high that they'll be partly drowned out by the party band. They also didn't install theater-style seating, so all the seats are at the same level, and the sightlines to the stage from the back rows are obstructed. On all Princess ships, the spa and the salon are in the same space that's either located by the gym or by the bottom level of the Piazza. On Sun, they've split them up so the salon is on deck 18 beside the gym, and the rest of the spa, including the Enclave Thermal Suite, is 11 floors below on decks 5 and 6, surrounded by cabins. Guest services, which is also normally located on the lower floor of the Piazza, is now in a cramped room located one deck below the Piazza, again surrounded by cabins. Since the room is so small, you have to line up in the elevator lobby outside. And believe me, there's always a lineup. More on that later. On very hot days in the Mediterranean, the covered areas of the Lido deck felt like a sauna because the windows don't open. There were no fans, and the ceiling height was so low I could easily touch it with my hands. There actually wasn't a single ceiling fan I could find on the entire ship, not even in outside bars or fast food areas where crew were sometimes working in temperatures of 40+ degrees Celsius or over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Another big design miss on Sun is the lack of a full wraparound promenade. This is a highly appreciated feature on a lot of older Princess ships, and its absence on the initial Royal Class ships was a major complaint that they never addressed in the newer iterations, and it looks like it'll be more of the same on Sphere Class. Promenade runs outside the buffet on deck 9 from the middle of the ship on both sides to the aft, and then goes down one level to meet on deck 8 by the aft pool. Another big miss is that there are several venues missing. There's no internet cafe, so you can't print anything. There's no library, no games room, no sports bar, no real indoor pool, no Churchill cigar lounge, and most importantly, there's no equivalent to the Vista Lounge venue found on most Princess ships, which provides a large enclosed space for big events. The lack of a space like Vista Lounge created a lot of challenges for the management team in finding appropriate venues for events like the Captain's Circle Elite Lounge and cocktail parties. They had to host the Elite Lounge in one of the main dining rooms in the middle of the afternoon, and a cocktail party in the dome, which didn't work well. Let's move on to access. I'll start with a hit, and that's the ship's new elevator system that directs you to an elevator based on where you're going. Instead of pushing an up or down button in the elevator lobby, you select your desired floor, and the display directs you to a specific elevator that's going to that floor. This has significantly decreased wait time and crowding compared to my sailings on other sold-out Princess cruises over the past year. There are 3 large elevator banks, as well as 2 glass elevators with an amazing view that are sort of hidden at the very back of the ship, so there's no shortage of options to quickly get around. Although it's easy to get to any deck, it's not easy getting to many venues because of poor signage, and I didn't find the app helpful for directions when you needed to change decks. For example, to get to the dome, you need to go forward from the forward elevator, go through a small doorway, and down a nondescript corridor, and the only way you'd know you're headed in the right direction is this tiny little sign that you need to basically be right in front of to be able to read. It's also hard to find the washroom in the dome area. It's hidden in this little alcove with no signage, so it took me more than 5 minutes of wandering around the massive dome area to find it. It can also get confusing trying to figure out which side is odd or even when arriving at your cabin's floor from the elevator or stairwell because there's no signs. The carpets aren't color-coded, and the stairwells and elevators don't all face the same direction. You can find a link to my video with tips on navigating the ship in the description. Let's move on to cabins, which are probably the biggest hit on Sun and the biggest upgrade from all previous Princess ships. I got to try 3 different cabins while I was on the ship, and they were all impressive. They finally went from using dated shower curtains in most cabins to glass doors. All bathrooms have illuminated fog-free mirrors with Beekman bath products. There's another illuminated mirror in front of the desk in the living space. All cabin categories except interiors have large, fancy couches. And the balconies are a good size, bringing the balcony size back to the industry average from the smaller sizes found on most Royal Class ships. The ocean view cabins also have a cozy alcove built into the window that ingeniously doubles as a storage space for life jackets. Unfortunately, because of the ship's overall design, there are also more undesirable or less desirable cabins to be conscious of. Because of a large indent in the middle of the ship, there are a lot of balconies with a clear view of other balconies. Since the buffet is now in the middle of the ship below cabins, and there's a large covered terrace from the middle to the back of the ship. Lower aft cabins have a lot of their view obstructed by that terrace. In my cabin on deck 10, you could also hear the music from the terrace a lot more than the waves. So if you decide to plan a cruise on Sun and want to have the traditional balcony view with nothing but ocean, pay very close attention to the deck plans when choosing your cabin. Let's move on to food. One good thing about the buffet terrace I mentioned is that they offer more fast food options, which is one of the hits on Sun. The terrace has a grill on one side with burgers and tacos, and a pizza place on the other, and both sides also have a bar. This is in addition to the burger and pizza places on the Lido deck, which now also offers separate kiosks for tacos and salad. There are also more places to get specialty coffee drinks. In addition to the International Cafe, there are 3 other coffee places on deck 7 and 17, with 2 of them also offering gelato. There's also an American diner that's now located at the back of the buffet that's not exactly fast food since it's a sit-down restaurant, but it features a lot of tasty guilty pleasures like ribs and cheesy fries. I also found that the Ocean Now food delivery service worked well when I ordered food to my room. No matter what time of day I ordered, I usually received it within around 20 minutes. Let's talk amenities. Something else you'll notice on the buffet terrace and other outdoor areas on Sun is a large variety of cozy deck furniture and loungers, many including head pillows, which I thought was a really nice touch. That's definitely one of the other hits on Sun. There's no shortage of comfortable areas to relax outdoors, with some spaces even offering clamshell loungers, which are very popular. Unfortunately, that's the only positive I could say about the major amenities on Sun. I mentioned the dome, which is a striking space, but they use it to do way too much. It works really well as a place to enjoy the sun in an air-conditioned space during the day. But because of those Cirque performances I mentioned, they kick everyone out at around 2 p.m. most days to start setting up. And since there aren't a lot of places to sit and there's no ticketing system, it's very difficult to get a seat for those performances, and you have to line up for at least 30 minutes. A very small portion of the adult pool comes into the dome that can be sealed off in bad weather, but that portion doesn't accommodate very many people, so the big question is, why did they bother? This is the only indoor pool on the entire ship, so if there was poor weather, this would be the only option for 4,300 people, so it could get messy in a hurry, and that's of course if the dome is open. If it's a Cirque night, make sure you get that swim in before 2 p.m. They also use the dome as the disco most nights, which doesn't work very well because the dance floor is small and the bar is in a separate room. It's very Instagram friendly because of all the lights, but not very practical. Speaking of pools, even though Sun is 25% larger than Princess's Royal Class ships, the public pools are about the same size. So on very hot days, they got the most crowded I've ever seen on a Princess ship, rivaling the crowds I saw on my last cruise on Norwegian Cruise Line. So that's another miss. None of the pools featured steps, so it could get awkward getting in and out, especially when they were crowded and people were hanging out in front of the ladders. One area that got much bigger on Sun was the Sanctuary, which is now the sun deck for guests and premium Sanctuary collection cabins. On all other Princess ships, the Sanctuary is a large, mostly shaded sun deck with luxurious loungers and cabanas that feature amazing service and a legendary afternoon tea service right to your lounger. It's very relaxing because everything is spaced out and it's very quiet, so it really does feel like a sanctuary, and it's available to any guest for a fee. While on Sun, the Sanctuary is much bigger with a pool and a bar, but it has very little shade. The loungers are all very close together, the cabanas are close to 400% more expensive, and there's no afternoon tea. It's also not available to guests who aren't in a Sanctuary collection cabin. On other Princess ships, I couldn't get enough of the Sanctuary, and the staff basically had to drag me out when it closed at 6 p.m. On Sun, I didn't even last an hour. They're playing pop music everywhere, so you can't relax. All the loungers are very close together, and I couldn't find a single lounger that's completely shaded. When I asked the attendants for help finding one, they said there wasn't one, and that unless I paid $500 for a cabana, I would have to go elsewhere. On other Princess ships, you can order delicious, healthy lunches that you can't find anywhere else, like this fattoush chicken salad. On Sun, sushi lovers will appreciate sushi as an option, but I don't eat seafood, so my only real option on the Sanctuary menu was the chicken wrap, which was about as flavorful as a wrap you'd buy at the airport. As someone who knows what the Sanctuary is like on other ships, the Sanctuary on Sun is a huge miss. But I get the distinctive feeling that Sun really isn't designed for loyal Princess cruisers. One of the managers told me that the ultimate vision is to make the Sanctuary like a beach club with DJs and daily activities, begging the question why they would call a lounge beach club a sanctuary, but I digress. He also said that they plan to ultimately convert all the sanctuaries in the fleet to a similar concept, which was really disappointing to hear. I heard the term identity crisis a lot while I was on Sun, and I think this is one of the examples of why. Okay, let's move inside to one of the other big changes on Sun, which is the 3-deck Piazza. Princess has made this a much bigger and brighter Coliseum-style space that's the hub for most activities and entertainment. They've consolidated most of the bars and casual restaurants into the space, as well as shore excursions, photography, and future cruises. Like the Dome, I would argue they've tried to do way too much with this one space. I think it works for a younger crowd, but not the 50 or 60 plus traditional Princess cruiser, so that's why I'm going to classify the Piazza design as a miss. Princess ships are known for having several intimate lounges located throughout the ship to enjoy a quiet drink and live music. They threw that out the window, and on Sun they only have 2 bars on the entire ship that are fully enclosed. Good Spirits and O'Malley's, which is a fun Irish pub with live music every night, but as with most venues on the ship, it's usually very hard to find a seat. From an activities and entertainment perspective, one thing I did like about the Piazza was the larger variety of activities they hosted there, like trivia and game shows, and a silent disco, which was a very welcome first for Princess. This worked well and helped ensure there was life and energy in the Piazza most evenings that I found lacking on other Princess ships. Let's talk about service, which was both a highlight and a disappointment while I was on the ship. In bars and restaurants, the service was generally very good. You could tell that Princess recruited its experienced A-list crew to be on the ship because they remembered your name, what you'd like to eat and drink, and were super friendly. So I would definitely say the crew was a hit. There were a lot of technology issues while I was on Sun. There were several times where my medallion wouldn't unlock my cabin door. I woke up one morning to no power in my room. My Plus package disappeared in the system without warning and I couldn't get it back. So I spent a lot of time in guest relations dealing with some sort of issue throughout my time on the ship, and most staff were helpful and friendly. But after several days where the glitches just kept piling up on top of all the other issues on the ship, I did ask to speak to management, and that's where things went quickly off the rails. I had one conversation with a supervisor that got cut short because he needed to help with a medical emergency. He said he'd reach out the next day, but never did. It took him 3 days to call me back, and that's only after I left several messages. When I asked to speak to the head of guest relations, it also took her 3 days and several messages to return my call. I was so frustrated that for the first time in all of my 40 plus cruises, I cornered the hotel general manager in the Piazza, who's one of the most senior officers on any ship, to share my experience. He was very friendly and made time right away to speak to me. He was very apologetic and did offer to send some wine to my room as a goodwill gesture, but this is how it showed up. No ice, no glasses, no card, and I would argue, no class. Just 2 bottles labeled with a luggage tag, and of course, I never heard from him or anyone else from management the rest of the cruise. This is, of course, a huge contrast to how the travel agents and influencers were treated when they were on the ship, where they were literally given the red carpet treatment. I'm not kidding. They literally brought in a red carpet just for them, while paying guests on board could watch from the other floors in the Piazza. So guest services management is definitely a miss. I mentioned that Princess was still doing a lot of construction work while I was on the ship, and several venues were closed or disrupted because of this work or because of those private events I mentioned for travel agents and influencers. Princess didn't mention these disruptions would be happening in advance of the cruise and offered very little communication during the cruise. Once we were on the ship, we did get a letter saying that some work was being done with no specifics other than it would happen at times to minimize disruption, which didn't end up being the case. Key venues like the jogging track were closed for several weeks with no notice. There were several days where crews were dismantling structures on Deck 19 that you could see, hear, and smell from the Lido deck during the day. Every day, large chunks of the Lido deck would be closed off because of work being done on showers or stairs. Activities like gym classes listed in the program would be canceled with no notice. Since the theater was always jammed when there were production shows, they did start adding a 3rd show the next day, but didn't communicate this in the program, so the first 2 shows were still over capacity. Needless to say, communication on Sun is a big miss. Last but definitely not least is the casino, which is usually one of my favorite venues, but definitely not on this ship. Princess opted not to follow the lead of other cruise lines that are building separate, sealed-off smoking section of the casino, and instead made the smoking section bigger than other ships. Smoking's allowed in a whopping 80% of the casino. It also features the worst selection of slot machines I've seen on any ship. There's a large bank of different Buffalo machines, but other big hits are noticeably missing, like Dragon Link, Locket Link, and Fire Link. There's also no bar, with very few servers roaming around, so it can take a while to get a drink while you're playing. I found the slot machines they did have extremely tight throughout most of my time on the ship, which just added insult to injury. This is the worst casino I've experienced at sea, so it's a definite miss. You can find a link to a full tour of the casino in the description. So that's a high-level overview of what works and what doesn't on this flashy but flawed and unfinished ship. Hit subscribe and watch out for a detailed review of Sun coming soon. In the meantime, you can find my guide to navigating the ship here. Thank you for watching, and happy cruising.